I'm a social conservative. Right? I wrote a book. My second book was all about the evils of pornography and why there should be significant regulation on pornography.
You were way ahead of your time.
I was 20 at the time. I'm 21, so it's been a while. But with that said, one of the concerns that I have is that it seems to me that a lot of the populist conservatives, particularly some of the social conservatives with whom I totally agree on principle, that they're operating from a premise, which is that we are at knife's edge on a lot of these issues, when I think that in many cases the issue has basically been lost not only at the legal level but at the cultural level. And so arguing that the government should be used in order to do X that I like, that while I may like that, well, that may be nice. While the left may do exactly the reverse to me, if it's just a question of whose ox is being gored, the reality is that my ox is likely to be gored a lot more often than the other guy's ox is likely to be gored. And not only that, if the country basically just becomes a raw battle between two competing poles of power who are just going to gore each other, that the country actually doesn't have a future, that there's no way for us to live together, because at a certain point, one of those groups is going to become the permanent minority. And then the question is going to become, well, why do I stay in a country with this other group of people who are cramming down their version of policy on me, when it's possible that Republicans, by taking the government out of the equation, in some cases, have actually allowed more room for cultural conservatism to thrive, meaning that when people don't feel threatened by cultural conservatism, when they don't feel that cultural conservatism is going to come along with the power of the government gun and compel particular activity, it's easier to make a case like, leave my church alone. And people say, okay, well, you're not trying to force anything on me, so I guess I'll leave your church alone a little bit more than, okay, well, my church is really important to me, and it's so important that when we get power, we're going to reverse Obergefell and we're going to pass a federal marriage amendment.
Right, which is not going to happen. Yeah, right. and I agree that there's a certain overenthusiasm, maybe.
And it could drive a reaction, is the point that I'm making. It's sort of the same point that you were making about Trump could drive a reaction that pushes everybody to the far left in the Democratic Party. The cultural conservative point is, if you say, I'm going to use the government to come after things that you like, and then they say, okay, well, when we get power, so far we've basically left the churches alone, but now we're going to go full Beto O'Rourke. We're removing all 501c3 status from every church that doesn't satisfy our priorities on same-sex marriage. Like that brings the entire country virtually to the point of open warfare. I mean, I famously said, Beto can't come take my kids. It's not a thing that
I remember. I remember that got some attention. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm pretty sympathetic in certain ways to the case for de-escalation, and I wrote a lot after Obergefell about sort of, how do we figure out pluralism, right? How do we figure out a way for religious conservatives to sort of be respected as a minority in a society that has changed, and how do we live together in peace and so on. I will say that I didn't feel like I got a ton of take-up on those arguments from my liberal friends, and I think part of what the social conservatives are reacting against too is the speed with which we went from same-sex marriage doesn't affect your marriage, and it's just a sort of expansion of freedom.
This I agree with, obviously.
Right, to, substantial, what
or
would
shutting
have been
down your
seen
church
as,
or your synagogue, yeah.
Right, substantial infringements on religious liberty, and infringements contemplated further, where, right, O'Rourke is like sort of doing the full, tax your churches and take your guns kind of liberalism. Although the fact that O'Rourke and other candidates like him didn't actually go anywhere in the end maybe is a sign that that some kind of cultural truce is more possible. But no, I go back and forth. I think there's definitely an argument for cultural de-escalation that is not where the sort of younger religious conservatives are right now. I think the challenge for Republicans, though, in sort of managing all this is figuring out, where they can deliver actual victories to religious conservatives too, right? Because if you say to religious conservatives, well, we're never getting rid of Obergefell, we're never having the federal marriage amendment or anything like that, religious conservatives can say, okay, I can live with that, but, what I've given blood, sweat, and tears to get justices on the Supreme Court, and at least they're going to create more space for abortion restrictions, right? And so, this is sort of the unanswered question right now of the Kavanaugh appointment, and sort of where does the court end up going on abortion, right? And if we go through another 5 years where the sort of Roberts and Kavanaugh between them sort of, at best maybe chip away a tiny bit at Roe, I think you're going to have a lot of religious conservatives who say, why did we fight so hard for Kavanaugh while Susan Collins was telling everyone he wouldn't overturn Roe? We're going to impose firmer litmus tests on judges that are more ends-based, more outcomes-based, more like what liberals impose. So I think that's like a zone where you can imagine, I think, religious conservatives justifiably saying that this whole system has not worked out well.
I mean, in that area, I'm in full sympathy. I mean, I think that there should be plain litmus tests when it comes to Supreme Court justices from the right. I mean, the left is not shy about this, but it's not even because the left ain't shy about it. I think that originalism does lead to particular results, and one of those results is that Roe is a bunch of crap, and pretty much everybody who has studied Roe as a legal matter, right, left, and center, and is honest about it, recognizes that whether you like the outcome or not, Roe has absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution of the United States. You may like the outcome, but like to me, there are a lot of, it was one of the interesting things about sort of the populist versus non-populist fight on the right is how much miscommunication there is. What I mean by that is this is a perfect example. I don't think there are a lot of people, even on the libertarian right, who would be anti, I mean, aside from maybe people who are overtly in favor of just pro-choice mechanisms. But if they're honest about their legal analysis, I don't think there are that many people on my side of the aisle who would say, there shouldn't be a litmus test on Roe. I think there absolutely should be a litmus test on Roe for judges. I'm not willing to trust justices with their vague articulations of originalism. I mean, I was the only person I know who came out against Roberts before he was actually confirmed in 2005 because he didn't have a track record. I came out against Kavanaugh because he didn't have a track record. So I'm very much in favor of conservatives driving a hard bargain.
And I don't think
these sorts of things.
Right, and I think that's too a case where I don't think it's mostly the sort of, limited government conservatives who are against imposing litmus tests. It's more there that they sort of, the institutional Republican Party is not enthusiastic about overturning Roe. And that in turn creates sort of pressures where it's easier for Republican justices to give, the Federalist Society a little of what it wants on Chevron deference, than it is to go further on Roe. Although, to be honest, even on the sort of administrative state stuff, I think you may get less from this court than some conservatives want or expect.
Did you know that every like on this video creates one additional glorious leftist tier? Don't ask me why. That's called science. To take advantage of this amazing opportunity, just hit the like button.